Did you ever see the Stephen King movie? But I remember it was all where machines took over, and one of them was a lawnmower.
Lawnmower Man?
Yeah, no, I just remember AC/DC did the soundtrack to it. Oh, it's gonna drive me nuts.
They'll put it in the chat room.
Yeah.
We got a little project we want to do. I've been watching these guys on YouTube build these ships, and I thought, well, what could I do? Or I want to build something. And I am fascinated, Husqvarna and Toro, they all have their own versions of robot lawnmowers now, and they're like $3,000, and that's not terrible. I just don't want to drop $3,000 on a mower, right? I mean, I can get a pretty sweet like riding mower for that price,
that's
right?
Me, so, Mike.
Yeah. So, but I thought, there's a lot of different technologies. I was at a technology conference, and then they were talking about 3D printing and some other things, and I thought, there's enough DIY technology now. I bet I could build my own. And so I wanted to engage my users or my listeners to say, hey, help me over the next year. We're going to build this robot lawnmower, and we'll start with propulsion. How are we going to drive this thing forward? How is it going to do its thing? And so again, engagement is what I'm looking for. So I wanted to, and listen, my listeners, this is right up their alley. I got emails last week like crazy when I talked about this.
And isn't that awesome when you're like, hey, I'm just going to try this, and all of a sudden it's like, boom, wow.
Yeah, the guy said, well, you better brush up on your welding skills, and he's probably right. Like I'm like, oh, okay, and then hey, you might want to get hyper GPS as opposed to trying to do eyesight, because eyesight's really, really hard, and so you start getting these kinds of emails, and I was like, now this is what I'm looking for. Like I want to actually hear from listeners. I want to know they're listening. And so I'm much more inclined when I think about stats, those kinds of stats, as opposed to downloads. I mean, I think downloads are just what I was going to say I can't say on and not be explicit, but download stats just drive me nuts. So
yeah. Carrie asked, it's a launch question. Yeah. Other than the intro/welcome episode, how do you decide which episode to launch with? I'm pretty much ready to push go. So my answer would be, do that, please. I have about 40 people in my immediate circle who have agreed to help share the show, but I have 4 interesting guests/topics I could kick off that she could kick off with, and I can't decide as I'm worried. What if I start with the local shipwreck coin expert, but the spear fisherman who almost got eaten by sharks? Who would be the winner? I'm thinking sharks. If I hear those two,
sharks beat bears.
Coin expert versus sharks. It's hard to beat shark, in my opinion.
Is this an episode of The Office that we've just come on to? Sharks beat bears. No, bears beat Battlestar Galactica. I don't know. Dave. Well, if you're thinking, Carrie, just pick the best one to you and go. It won't matter, to be honest with you. A couple months from now, it won't matter. Pick the best one that you think is the best, and then launch that one.
Which one is your audience more likely to share with their friends? And to me, when I hear those two, I'm like, sharks. Anytime somebody's got, digging a shark tooth out of their leg, I'm down for that. I mean, Scott Johnson has a new show called What Did That Feel Like.com, I believe is for that. And he just interviewed a guy who was apparently okay talking about it. Vet who got blown up in a tank and he got home, but his foot was basically, and this was their words, applesauce. And so he went through like 17 different surgeries, and eventually just said, all these guys are coming in here losing their legs, they get a prosthetic, and they're walking out of here. I'm gimping along. He's like, just take it off. And so it was all the behind the scenes of like, A, what does it feel like to get blown up? B, just that whole thing. And like he said, he explained how he literally, like right after he got blown up, they finally have to, like, the cavalry comes in to save you because there's all these people that just blew up your tank that want to kill you now. So how he got saved. And then once he gets to the hospital, they get like this little phone so he can call his mom to go, hi, mom, just got blown up. Okay, love you, bye. And he goes, what was really weird is because his mom had received a phone call, that was like the last communication she got for days. And she's like, is he dead? It was like, so, but every time I hear an episode, I'm like, okay, I would share this because it's an interesting story. Hence the whole premise of his podcast is, what was it like? Like one episode was a woman accidentally killed a motorcycle, like hit a guy on a motorcycle and killed him. And you always think, oh, that poor family, they lost somebody on the motorcycle. Yeah, what's it like to live with the fact that you killed somebody? Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting show. And so I would go with that and start off with, which one do you think people would share the most? And I'm not, Jim, I know we've talked about this in the past. Are you a fan of, hey, this is Dave, I'm starting the show because I want to inspire people to, like the episode 0? Are you a fan of episode 0?
Well, it's handy to have it. I think I wouldn't put a lot into it. I mean, I wouldn't put a piece of crap out there, because that may be the first thing people hear. And if episode 0 is embarrassing, that's not a great start, right? And there are people who will give you a one and done. They'll be like, okay, I'll give this a try. So I think if you're going to do episode 0, it needs to be very, very well done. I think if you're using it as a promo, it needs to be very, very short. Just get in there 2 minutes, maybe. Hey, here's what we're doing. Now, what I wouldn't do is I wouldn't create a big, a big shock and awe promo. And then the very first show, it's like, hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Captain Mellow here today, and we're going to talk super slow and, those kinds of things. I would want that to kind of match the cadence of what your shows are going to be like. Could you morph that over time? Absolutely. But, that's one of those things. We've talked about this before, having that super voiceover guy intro in a world. And then, hi, how's it going here?
Right.
Like there's this big difference in between the voiceover guy and you. I preferred my own voice as voiceover in the sense, but I don't do voiceover. I actually say the intro every single time. It actually allows me to personalize it and yet get the same information out, right? So because I say it, I'm really good at saying our intros, but I can personalize them each and every time. We say on Home Gadget Geeks, I'll say, we're live from the Average Guy.tv studios here in a insert the weather of what's going on, right? A little personal tidbit of, it was stormy. Thursday night, we had gigantic thunderstorms coming through, the same ones that caused the tornadoes up in Ottawa, Canada. And people surprisingly like the weather. It's a weird thing, right? So so that's a long way to go on that one. But make sure they all match, or at least get as close to them as you can. Don't have this shock and awe. You spent hundreds of hours on 2 minutes of your intro or 2 minutes of your 0 episode, and then you don't have any of those in your first episode.
Yeah. I was giving the wrong domain. It's whatwasthatlike.com.
Okay.
And to me, I always picture the episode 0 where they go, hey, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. And I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
It's like, to me, that's kind of like the Walmart greeter going, hi, welcome to Walmart. Hold on. Nope, don't go in the store yet. Wait, I'm going to tell you about me first. And you're like, no, it's like,
that's so good. That's such a good analogy. You're like, I don't care. Actually, don't care. I don't care who you are.
No, I just need to get my English muffins and get out of here. So
I just came here to get some Geritol.
So what I would prefer to do is hit them with something like, oh my gosh, Shark Week, holy cow. And then I hope you enjoyed this. And then do the, I'm Dave Jackson, I do this, and here's why I do this, and blah, blah, blah. For more information, go out. But I would hit them with, because I just was listening to some marketing podcast, and there's apparently some famous marketing book that everybody quotes, and it's out of print. And in that book, the guy says, your customers don't care about you. It was like, it's hard to kind of deal with, but your customers really don't care until you give them a reason to care. And I was like, that's a good point.
Yeah, they'll get to know you. And Carrie says she's got to re-record her intro. And Carrie, we're not saying to do that, but if you need to, I feel like they'll get to know you as they listen to you each week.
Right.
That's how they'll get to know you. This is where I think having a few in the can is actually very, very helpful. Or, like I would say, record the first 5 and then throw them away because they're awful, usually. But take the sound bites of your guest from those episodes, the early ones, and promo them. That's what people are coming to hear, the content, not you. They'll get to know you, and it'll be a big part of what you do. Like they'll find little things to talk about you later on. We've done all these, you think, Dave, some of your listeners notice things that are behind you. We talk about your Hall of Fame award that's sitting on a box over there in the left-hand corner, right? People notice those things. Right?
I did move the trash bags.
That stuff comes later. But Carrie, I think if you've already got some pre-recorded sound bites and you can have those people listening to that promo get a feel for what kind of content is going to be there, I think content about your show is better than content about you. And
the other thing why some people even do an episode 0 is because you can't be accepted into Apple or any other directory without at least one live episode. So they'll make this episode 0, get listed in all the directories, and then they'll have their big launch on whatever day, and they will, they'll throw out their 300 to 400 episodes that they want, 3 episodes to 400, somewhere in there between 3 and 400, meaning 3 as in 2, 3, 4, or 1 also works, by the way. And then throw those out and then tell the world. And I thought it was great that I, in my last episode, I mentioned thunderclap.it. And as I'm going out to the website to get their website, I thought it was weird that their website was down. And the reason it's down is because they went out of business. And I'm like, dang it. So
that happens. Carrie's staying in the chat room. She has to redo it. It'll delay her 2 weeks. Carrie, I think that's your call. Like if it's good enough, just go. Because
here's the thing: the longer you wait, I had a guy that's recorded 10 episodes of just his story, and it's all about helping the military. And I'm like, dude, your story is amazing. And if he shares any part of his story, it's amazing. I know I just said don't talk about yourself. He's not boring. And so he's got his 10 episodes, but he still hasn't launched yet. And then he just interviewed somebody else. And he's like, their story's better than mine. I'm like, you need to quit recording and launch. I said, because the longer you sit on these episodes, then you get into this. Well, wait, which one should I? No, just push go. Because, and Jim, you said something that's like my new mantra. In 8 months from now, it's not going to matter. It's really not. And so we get hung up on this. I don't want to blow my launch. And I'm like, I got news for you. Your launch isn't going to be, yay.
There's some things you can do wrong. Like don't get us wrong on this. You can F this thing up pretty good, but don't worry. I mean, do the best you can and get out the door, for God's sakes. Yeah. And a year from now or 8 months from now, whatever, you'll be wishing you could take those episodes down. You'll be like, oh God, these are terrible.
Well, exactly. Because if I start off the show and it's super loud music and you can't hear anything, that's not a good way to start the first episode.
But if that's all you got, sometimes you don't know it. Like that's pretty obvious, but you might have somebody who's, on a Blue Yeti and the Yeti's, like you said, far away and you got this echo, but that's the best you can do. I think it's still better to get moving than it is to just keep obsessing about it and get nothing done. Because I guarantee you, if you never launch your podcast, 0% of the world will hear it.
Exactly.
I can guarantee that those numbers I can guarantee.
Well, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I wanted to put that almost inspired me to do my last episode, which was all about a podcast launch, is I want to be sure to point out that one of the mistakes that people make is they will try to save money. They'll do the $20 a month plan or wherever they're at. And they'll like, I'm doing a show on Batman. I'm doing another show on Superman. And then I'm doing another show on the Hulk. And they're all going to be on one feed because everybody loves comic books. And this is going to be great. You can subscribe to one feed and then you can get them all. And I've seen people do this and they're saving, $10 a month doing this. And then 8 months later, they're like, well, it turns out that everybody that loves Batman actually hates Superman. And so how do I take all this stuff and all my stats and now break them into 3? And you're like, well, we can do that. You're probably going to lose some of your audience and you're definitely losing some of your stats and you're kind of starting over. And I see people do that on a regular basis. And I'm like, in a Netflix society, this whole like, I'm just going to give you everything and you have no choice over which one you get to listen to. I'm like, maybe not the brightest idea. And here's the fun part. I forgot to make that point in my podcast. Now, there's still a part of me that wants to go back and actually record that in that and put it out. And I still might, because it really does bug me that I didn't say that. But the majority of the people that are going to hear that episode have already heard it. And it's like, move on to the next one. But you can really obsess over stuff. And always, I mean, I could go back. I wish I could remember. There was one, I did something. You've ever had somebody that they'll say something and you know what they mean, even though they said it wrong?
Right.
I do that a lot in my, well, not about a lot, but I do that frequently. And I always listen. I try to listen to my podcast before I put it out to the world. And I'll hear something and I'm like, oh, that's wrong. And I'm like, and then I'll either fix it later where it was just something I said. I didn't even notice when I said it. And then later I'll summarize something and I'm like, okay, I said it right there. So hopefully people got it. And a lot of times it's just the whole, yeah, I think people know what I meant when I said that from context. And I'm like, don't worry about it. And I've never heard somebody come back and go, hey, did you know that you said the thing and it's not really?
There will be, though, sometimes those people.
Oh, yeah.
Like
That's
there
true.
are the exactness police who are like, blah, 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 44, blah, blah, 56, 75, 94. And you're like, no, it doesn't really matter, to be honest. And, you know, you're going to always fight those. There will always be those kinds of people out there. And actually, for us, it's good enough kind of people. They're maddening, but they're actually super helpful. So, you know, I always respond to those kinds of people very defensive at first. Like, oh, God, good enough, freaking good enough. But then I think about it for a while and I'm like, oh, okay, they're probably right. And I can probably change some things. So we need that tension, by the way. I think it's good because if we wait for perfection, it never happens. Getting 100% of the way there is super expensive. And it takes a lot of time, or it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of money. Getting 80% of the way there for most people is in the right spot. Will it have holes and problems with it? Totally. But I think we need to get to 80% and then try a little bit harder. 80% and try a little bit harder. And so that tension is good. I think it should be there.
Yeah, Jason says maybe some folks hesitate launching for fear the podcast rodeo guy will stumble upon their show. Can I tell you something, though? There was a guy, my last episode, which will be out probably in like a week and a half. I'm actually way ahead on that show. And it was called like the Adgrod cast, something you couldn't even say. And it was literally a bunch of guys having fun. They got a band together and the whole thing is improv. And literally it was like, welcome to the show. I'm Jeff. All right, here we go. And I was like,
almost like a live stream as opposed to like,
and I said, when you make me, I said, it's a deal breaker. If I have to turn the volume knob, I said, and you guys, the last guy on was just blasting my head off. I said, and so I literally listened about, I'm going to say 8 seconds of their show. I said, because in reality, that's how much I would listen to it. I said, so here's the fun part. I liked your intro music because it was them as a band. It was like, you know, welcome to the Adgrod Kids podcast. And then there was like 5 seconds. And I said, you guys are having a blast. They're laughing. It's obvious that there's been a bunch of things going on before they hit record that they're laughing. And I said, if you guys are having fun, by all means, keep doing this podcast. I said, but that volume issue is a deal breaker. And, you know, so, and then I sent that over to them and I'm thinking, you know, they got an 8-second review of their show. And they said, thank you so much for that. We didn't realize, you know, that blah, blah. And I have a lot of people that I've at times that I'm like, I'm being honest, but I'm like, wow, I'm peeing in their Cheerios and I've always expect them to come back and go, you're so mean. And it's always like, wow, thank you so much for that. I didn't realize that, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, and that's really, it sounds, because there was a while that I had a hard time doing that show because I didn't want to say anything negative about people. And I always try to find something positive. But I've had more people say, thank you, because all my friends said it was awesome. And I'm like, well, that's why, you know, you need somebody who's, you know.
It's really hard to do though. Like I'm scared to death that you and Eric would like review my show, my Home Gadget Geeks. Like if you and Eric start, I would flip. And I'm pretty comfortable with my show. And actually this one I just did, the solo one I did, I listened to all the way through twice because I wanted to make sure, because I was solo, I kind of wanted to make sure like I hadn't really screwed it up somewhere. But like, I'm super comfortable with you, Dave. But if you and is Eric as well, like he's an Omaha guy. I know him. One of his daughter is in my program at Gallup, so like I know Eric really well, and I would be scared to death to have you guys review my podcast.
It was super tough. I had Troy Heinrichs and Wayne Henderson do the Packers Fan podcast, and they submitted it once, and they did what I call a double intro, where you say, today on the show we're going to be doing the blah blah blah, and then later in the show they go, hey, we're going to be talking about the blah blah blah, and here's the blah, and you're like, and then they hit, here's my interview, and then you hear like the intro again, and you're like, and so they did it the first time. And what's interesting, and this is something I have to work on with that show, I listen different when I do that show now, and I'm trying to just do it as a listener, and I'm hyper sensitive now, and I've got to find a way to tone that down a bit, because they said on the show, we're like, this is right when Aaron Rodgers got paid. Then they said this and that, and we're going to talk about a deal that went on. And so they did kind of reintroduce that. So they did kind of a double introduction. In fact, Wayne even said, and like Troy said previously, and I'm like, wait a minute, if you're saying previously, you're saying the same thing again. And so it was funny because I gave him the buzzer at one point. I go, you said you were going to talk about this, and you're not talking about it yet. And so that was kind of tough because those are my buddies. And then when I listened back to my own review, I said, you know what's weird about that? They had just started, because I said, you guys aren't talking about this big trade yet. I said, you kind of build it up. And I said, and as I listened to when I hit the buzzer, they had just started talking about the trade. I'm like, but I missed it.
Yeah.
Because I'm hyper. Yeah. So it's a weird show.
Well, it's hard to be a critic that way. I mean, it's easy to be a critic when you T-bone somebody. But you're advertising it like, hey, I'm coming in. I'm going to crush you. Not really, but that's what it feels like. Any of that feedback sometimes, because it's personal. It's tough. I might actually, I'm thinking about this. I might go grab a random episode of the School of Podcasting and try to critique my own show. I like it. Go back a ways, right? You'd go back a ways, maybe.
Yeah, something that's not so, because it dawns on me that my whole thing is get to the meat and potatoes. And normally I do because of my podcast first, because it's a fun little story. They're usually fairly short. And it's a way to get people to go, maybe I should do this podcasting thing. But it's never the title of the episode. It's always, Danny Pena does blah, blah, blah. Well, okay, then why are you making me sit through this thing? On podcast Rodeo, I always get to the meat and potatoes first. And I'm like, I don't do that always. So
don't do as I do as I say. Is that
basically. Look at me, I'm a hypocrite. Well, I also love the fact that there was. Can we say something slightly explicit?
Sure.
There is just to show you that I always want to kind of go, hey, guess what? Apparently, I don't know anything. There is a show called Come Town, and they were on. They randomly came up. And I was like, oh, I got to listen to a show called Come Town. This is ridiculous. So I put it on, and it's three guys. Turns out it's three guys that are professional comedians that I've never heard of, but nonetheless. And it's the Three Guys, One Brain show. And they're talking about, I think they ended up talking about medication and antidepressants or something like that. But it took them a good time to get there. And it was a lot of inside jokes. And I was like, I'm like, dudes, you didn't even say what Come Town's about. There's you barely introduced who each other are. I'm like, this is just I said, number one, I would probably like this show more if I was 22. I said, it seems a little more younger, male oriented. I said, blah, blah, blah. I said, but for me, I'm like, this needs work. And then it turns out that episode got a huge spike. Why? Because somebody on the Come Town Reddit found that, apparently, and sent all their people over. And to their credit, their audience didn't come over and go, you're full of crap, blah, 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 and attack me. All they said was, oh, by the way, this show makes $450,000 a year on Patreon. And I'm like, no way. Go over. The guy was wrong. They're making $455,000 a year on Patreon. And I was like, you're kidding me.
Yeah. But it is seeing, like, we definitely see podcasting through a different lens.
Yeah.
And it's full circle back to our radio conversation in the live show about superimposing radio ideas on podcasting. And Dave, I think sometimes you and I would superimpose podcasting ideas on podcasters to say it's got to be a linear show. It has to have a take and not suck. It needs to, it needs to get to the point. It needs to, does it? I mean, I just said, like, I like Patreon's another one of those marks of engagement that that I track. Like, that's what's important. And so how well do we do on Patreon? You do really well on this show on Patreon. That's a good mark of engagement to me, and I'm like, okay, so that means, is it $455,000 a year? No, I'd be renegotiating my contract with you.
Right.
That's a whole nother topic. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's what they're doing is working because they're getting, I mean, for that audience, for whatever that is, they love that. So you can't, I don't think you can poo-poo it.
And what's funny is I started listening to the new Serial. If I remember, are you one of the people that never listened to Serial?
I've never have. Nope. Not once. Nope.
The first season was awesome. And the second season was not. So I'm starting to listen to the third season, and it's interesting because she does something where, Dave was sitting in a room. Behind him were 37 pictures, some of them crooked, of people who had been listening to his show. There was Darwin Dave holding a red thermos. The thermos was his father's. And the whole time you're like, wait a minute, you were talking about the room. Like, they do the whole theater of the mind where I'm going to have a ton of descriptions about something, and the fact that and I'm just like, so when she started that, I'm like, oh, she's doing the Serial thing. And then there was a part of me that was like, and then what's weird is about the time I was like, I don't think I'm going to like this episode, she finally got to the story, and then I was sucked in.
Yeah.
Because it's about Cleveland. I'm like, I should kind of like this. And there were some interesting points, and it's definitely but man, her opening to that thing where she's explaining what the building looks like, the Justice Center in Cleveland, Ohio. I was like, I don't know that I really need this to understand, but
that's you.
Right. But the fun, so that's when I was sitting there thinking about this. I'm like, this is the AC/DC effect. What I mean by this is, if you put on an old AC/DC album and the latest one, they have not changed a single bit. And if you love AC/DC, you're going to love the first one. You're going to love the latest one. And I was like, wait a minute. The one thing that made Serial really cool is now the thing for me, and that's the key. That's the key point you just said. For me, is now kind of getting on my nerves. I'm like, can we just get to the story and not the colorful explanation? And so I think it's something we all have to kind of probably get a handle on, that eventually people are going to go, that's the same old, same old. And some people love the fact that you never change. And then some people are like, it's just Dave doing that whole start a podcast thing again.
Mm-hmm. Well, you can't please everybody, right? You got to do what makes you feel good and you're comfortable with. And then you got to be comfortable with the outcomes. What are we, what are you hoping for, and what's it doing, and how much time are you putting in? Are you getting satisfaction out of it? For me, at work, it takes on a completely different angle. Like, I get paid to do this. So I can't, it's not about what I like. It's about what the company wants to do. And so I need to, and I get to, don't get me wrong. I get to have a lot of creative direction in where we go. And I decide on a lot of things that we do, but I can't just all of a sudden go, hey, we're going to start a new podcast and we're going to talk about, name the thing. Let's do a sports podcast at Gallup. Right. And you're like, no, like, yeah, that would not work. That people would be like, what are you doing? They'd probably let me do it, to be honest. But a lot of people would be like, what are you doing there?
I want to add the Beat the Toaster segment to the new Gallup podcast.
What do you mean?
Oh, there's a thing on one. That's an actual thing where they'll ask some sort of trivia thing, and they'll hit a toaster, and you have to come up with.
Oh, you got to come up with the answer.
Name 7 things that blah blah blah. Okay, and the toaster's down. Go. And you're like, and then they have the tin little music, and then it's, oh, sorry, toast, you didn't do it. I'm like, beat the toaster, or name that sound. That's always another good one where they're gonna play. That's like,
we have a real popular one going on right now that we pulled out of the air. Nobody was really thinking about this content of one of our products, and we pulled it out of the air, and it's been super popular. And we're getting tons. And how do I know it's popular? I'm getting tons of feedback on it. Like, people are saying all the time, oh, you gotta listen in our social groups. You gotta listen to this, or you gotta hear this, or this has to be a part of what you're doing. And so when you start getting those kinds of recommendations, you kind of like, okay, I think we're onto something here. And it was just going to be a 1-season wonder. We were going to do one series, 14 parts, be done with it. But now we're starting to think, okay, what's next? And I actually asked the audience, like, hey, what do you want to hear next? And
Nice.
and we can't do everything they ask for, but certainly you can do some of it, and we get some great ideas out of it. So good to ask them, good to listen. Good to know it's engaged.
So when you do your show for work, what are you guys measuring to figure out if Jim gets to keep his job?
Yeah, so Spreaker, we're on Spreaker there, and
Mhm.
so I publish Spreaker numbers every single month to the leadership team that kind of makes these decisions. We don't spend a lot on this thing, so it's not like they would be like, it's just some time and some other things. So it doesn't have to do a ton, but we've just recently done a whole overhaul on our Google Analytics, so we can kind of see where the leads are going, and we have 2 new systems coming in that will help us match those to sales, and so I'll get a really good look at what's the value of our blog, what's the value of the podcast, where are we getting conversions, all those things. We'll treat it like it's a product, and where are we going, what's it doing, and what's its value. And 1 year when we first started, I could calculate about $50,000 worth of revenue just directly to the blog and not even the podcast.
Wow.
And we know the podcast is super popular now amongst our customers, because when we do these conferences, I get crushed. Like everybody wants to see me. Well, okay, that's a pretty good mark of engagement.
I'm ecstatic. I updated my phone while we were doing the show today to
Apple 12 or iOS 12, whatever it is.
And Overcast has updated, and they now have a search bar at the top of the app. So when I'm looking for cereal, because they have a weird thing. It used to be, if there was an episode available, they would show up at the top of the list. But if they didn't, they would still be there, but you had to go to the bottom. So I was constantly going, I know it's in here now. So now if I want to listen to cereal, I can. Yeah, that works. Very cool. So
you have to have the 12. You have to
have that feature, because I saw somebody had said that the new Overcast 5, and I saw where Overcast 5 works on iOS 12, and I'm like, oh, I need to update my phone. I'll cross my fingers and see what happens. So far my phone's not on fire.
It's sitting there. Download and install. I think I'll wait.
Yeah. So
I haven't heard about any problems, but I think I'll wait.
I've yet to do. Have you played with the Siri shortcuts? I know they are something, and I should look into them, but I've yet to. I just know there are things you can have Siri do that sounds fun. I don't know. I've yet to hear an actual example of, right now I just have her set timers and tell me what the weather is and things like that. So, but all right, my friend. Well,
gotta go out and check my steps.
I'm going to go hang out with Nick Suberling.
Nice.
Somewhere in my area. He said he's got a soccer game or something like that. He goes, how close are you to this? And I'm like, 15 minutes.
Sweet.
Then I'm sadly going to go help my brother close his pool, which
Oh,
means summer is over.
it is. I wish I was near you guys today. I'd love to hang out with you, Nick. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, I told him, I said, dude, if you're in Ohio, he goes, I'm always in Ohio. I live in Dayton. I'm like, okay, if you're closer than you are normally, I said, I will definitely make the trip. So that's going to be fun.
Enjoy.
All right. See you, everybody.
Have a good weekend. We'll see you next week. Oh, hey, speaking, Dave, next week, my Get Hip thing starts. So you the high school program starts next week. So you might want to grab I think I'm going to be out for that one for sure. So you might need to grab
we can do that.
A co-host. Sorry. Yeah. Next 6 weeks are going to be kind of rough, just to be honest.
Fun. All right, man.
All right. Talk to you later. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.